The Yom Kippur War of 1973 did not erupt from a vacuum. It was the explosive result of years of simmering tension. To truly understand why this war began, we must look back to the Six-Day War of 1967. In that swift and decisive conflict, Israel achieved a stunning victory against its Arab neighbors, capturing vast territories, including the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank from Jordan, and the strategic Golan Heights from Syria. This outcome was a profound humiliation for the Arab world. The defeat left a deep wound that refused to heal, creating a powerful desire for revenge and the recovery of their lost territories. The United Nations passed Resolution 242, which called for Israel to withdraw from occupied territories in exchange for peace and recognition. However, this resolution was interpreted differently by each side, and ultimately failed to bring about a lasting settlement. The years between 1967 and 1973 were marked by the War of Attrition, a low-level but constant conflict along the Suez Canal. Anwar Sadat, who became president of Egypt after Nasser's death in 1970, knew that the status quo could not hold. He believed that only a military shock could break the political deadlock and force the superpowers to take the Arab position seriously. For Syria, under President Hafez al-Assad, the motivations were similar, but focused on reclaiming the strategic Golan Heights. The two leaders began to secretly coordinate their plans, forming a united front with the objective of launching a surprise two-front war against Israel. The key to the Arab plan was absolute secrecy and deception. Egypt engaged in a masterful campaign of disinformation. It conducted numerous military exercises near the Suez Canal, making the sight of massed troops a routine occurrence that lulled Israeli intelligence. Behind this screen, Egypt and Syria received massive shipments of modern military hardware from the Soviet Union. The chosen date was October 6, 1973. Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, selected with brilliant strategic cunning. On this day, much of Israel would be at a standstill. Soldiers would be on leave and transportation would be minimal, severely slowing Israel's reserve mobilization. Despite worrying signs, Israeli intelligence largely dismissed the possibility of an imminent attack, trapped by their own overconfidence. At precisely 2:05 in the afternoon on October 6, 1973, the war began with shocking ferocity. Over 2,000 Egyptian artillery pieces and rockets unleashed a deafening barrage on the Israeli Bar-Lev line fortifications. As shells rained down, waves of Egyptian commandos and rubber dinghies paddled across the canal to scale the massive sand walls. The Egyptians had devised an ingenious solution to breach the sand ramparts, high-pressure water cannons that quickly eroded passages for tanks. Within hours, engineers had opened dozens of breaches and laid bridges, allowing a flood of Egyptian tanks to pour into the Sinai Peninsula. The Israeli forces along the Bar-Lev line were completely overwhelmed. The surprise was total and devastatingly effective. Simultaneously, the Syrian army launched its massive assault on the Golan Heights with over 1,200 tanks against fewer than 180 Israeli tanks. 3 Syrian infantry divisions surged forward, vastly outnumbering the Israeli defenders in a desperate and brutal battle. The most famous engagement took place in what became known as the Valley of Tears, where one Israeli brigade fought against an entire Syrian division. After the initial shock, Israel's military machine began to recover. Within 72 hours, hundreds of thousands of reservists had reported for duty. On the Golan Heights, having halted the Syrian advance, the Israelis went on the attack, pushing Syrian forces back across the ceasefire line toward Damascus. To relieve pressure on Syria, Sadat made a fateful decision, ordering his armies to advance beyond their protective SAM missile umbrella into the open desert. On October 14th, Egypt launched a major offensive with hundreds of tanks moving toward the strategic Mitla and Gidi passes. What followed was the largest tank battle since World War II. Israeli tank crews and air force decimated the advancing Egyptian columns. The Israelis destroyed over 250 Egyptian tanks for the loss of very few of their own, marking the turning point of the war. Israeli commanders devised Operation Stout-Hearted Men, a bold plan to cross the Suez Canal in the opposite direction and get behind Egyptian forces. On the night of October 15th, Israeli paratroopers crossed the canal near the Great Bitter Lake, establishing a bridgehead on the African side. This was followed by a massive engineering effort to construct a pontoon bridge under heavy Egyptian fire, changing the entire strategic picture. The Yom Kippur War quickly escalated into a major confrontation between the Cold War superpowers. the United States, and Soviet Union. The Soviet Union launched a massive airlift operation to resupply Egypt and Syria, flying tons of equipment to Damascus and Cairo. President Nixon authorized Operation Nickel Grass, a massive American airlift to resupply Israel with tanks, artillery, and advanced missiles. As Israeli forces encircled the Egyptian Third Army, Soviet leader Brezhnev sent stern warnings, even suggesting USSR military intervention. On October 24th, the United States military was placed on DEFCON 3, the highest nuclear alert since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Henry Kissinger engaged in frantic shuttle diplomacy, flying between Moscow, Tel Aviv, and Cairo to broker a ceasefire. The war officially ended on October 25th, with UN Resolution 338, though sporadic fighting continued for several more days. The final battlefield map was a tangled mess. Israel held territory on both sides of the Suez Canal and had encircled Egypt's Third Army. Kissinger's shuttle diplomacy led to disengagement agreements, first with Egypt in January 1974, then with Syria in May. The war cost all sides dearly. Israel suffered around 2,700 killed, Egypt 15,000, and Syria 3,500. Who won the war? Militarily, Israel achieved a remarkable comeback victory, but politically the outcome was more complex. Egypt and Syria had shattered the myth of Israeli invincibility and restored Arab pride, giving Sadat the political victory he needed. For Israel, the war was a national trauma that shattered the country's confidence and led to government resignations and military reforms. For Egypt, the war was seen as a strategic victory that gave Sadat the confidence to pursue a dramatic shift toward diplomacy and peace. This led directly to the Camp David Accords of 1978, where Sadat, Begin, and Carter signed a historic peace treaty. Egypt became the first Arab country to recognize Israel, with Israel returning the entire Sinai Peninsula by 1982. The war triggered the 1973 oil crisis when Arab nations imposed an embargo, causing severe economic recession in the West. The Yom Kippur War ended Israeli military dominance, created the first Arab-Israeli peace, and showed how regional conflicts could affect global stability. If you found this historical analysis informative, please like this video, share it with others interested in history, and subscribe for more in-depth documentaries. The Yom Kippur War remains a pivotal moment that reshaped the Middle East and demonstrated the complex interplay between regional conflicts and global politics.